Yeah. So I'll just go back there for a second. So what I said is that I recommend you have 3 different kinds of projects per quarter that are going to further what you're up to. The first project is a money generating project. What are you going to do to generate more money coming in? By the way, how many of you are not business owners? Great. I recommend that you start something, okay? Even if it's just a side business, simply for the tax benefits, okay? There are massive tax benefits to being a business owner that don't exist when you're not a business owner, okay? If you are just going to work a job for the rest of your life, the government will earn way more of your money than you will, okay? So I'm happy to talk with you each individually about what that might look like. But even if you're just looking to start a business, and in fact, in the exploration of starting a business, you can still have the write-offs without ever actually starting your business, okay? And there's ways to do that as well, okay? So I said the first project should be a money-generating project. I said the second project should be a relationship-generating project. Now, that could look a lot of different ways. That could be a personal relationship that you're generating and that you're creating and that you're moving forward. It could be a work relationship. It could be meeting new people and networking. You know, it could be customer relationships. There's a lot of different kinds of relationships in your life, okay? A lot of which, if you improved on, would improve your business and your personal life, yes? Yes. The third project is what I call an energy generating project. So an energy generating project is a project whereby it improves either your health or well-being, or in some cases, your mental or emotional well-being, okay? So either your physical, mental, or emotional well-being gets impacted, okay? How are you dealing with that with yourself? It could be that you're taking on for you and your family. It could be that you're just taking on yourself. There's a lot of different things it could be. It could be that you're learning how to generate your energy and building energy and stuff like that. That could be part of it. But it's an energy generating project. Does anybody know what Anthony Robbins had to say about energy generating? No? Somebody posted a quote just today, actually. Anthony Robbins said that the level of energy that you have will determine how successful you are ultimately, right? Because your energy feeds, something that then feeds your results, okay? So ultimately, the source of all results is the energy that you have, okay? And so that makes sense that we would want that to be one of the 3 priority projects that you're at work on, is how to build and maintain your own energy level, yes? Yes. Okay, good. So can you just move it? So here's go back one. So again, I'm sending you all these slides, but new levels of relationship. I just want to tell you that the one massive result that I caused was in the relationship generating. I created a game called Build My Centers of Influence. Okay. So centers of influence are people in your life who are hubs of groups of communities of other people. So who's somebody in your life that you know is a hub and knows a lot of people? Sean. Very good, right? For those of you who didn't say me, hello, right? I have like thousands of people in my network, right? Like I should be on your list of centers of influence, okay? And then you'll have other people on your list that are centers of influence. People like George Moen is on my list, right? As a center of influence. Andrew's on my list as a center of influence. Okay, Jacob's on my list of a center of influence. These are people who have networks and groups of people around them. So they are a center hub for multiple environments and communities of people, okay? So that was a relationship generating project that I took on that ended up being very, very useful in my business and personal life, okay? Developing centers of influence. Okay, so go to the next screen, please. So by December 31st, we want to have 100% of the small game items complete and 100% of the big game items have been acted upon, okay? So how that looks, okay, is if you put your small game stuff here, goals, and your big game goals here, and then you create actions based on your big game goals, where will you end up? Somewhere in the middle, right? Okay? You won't end up here on the small end. You may not end up here on the big end, but you'll end up somewhere on the spectrum, which will at least be more than the small game. You get that? That's why when we create actions based on the big game, not on the small game. Okay? And we might have several pathways to get to an end result. So for example, let's say your goal is to bring in $100,000 next year. Okay? So let's say for Jacob and I, if Jacob and I created that goal in one of our businesses, okay, we may not create it in a specific business. We may create a goal of $100,000 in new revenue comes in, okay? Now, Jacob's created goals much bigger than that, just so we're clear. This 100,000 would be a small game for Jacob and I, okay? However, we're going to create, how does this business bring in 100,000? Then how does this business bring in 100,000? Then how does this business bring in 1,000? So we're going to have 5 different streams of getting to the $100,000 mark, okay? 5 different revenue streams, 5 different action plans, 5 different things for each one of our businesses. So we're going to create it as if it was this one business bringing in that amount, what is everything I would need to do to cause that? And then we're going to do the same thing with the next game and the same thing with the next game. Now, will each one of those games individually bring in 100 grand? No. Probably not. But combined total with all those pathways will easily probably make that target. You get that? Okay, so it's a matter of momentum. All right, and building momentum takes some very specific things to build that. All right, so now, because I have Eric here and because he's an expert at this, I'm going to have him come up and speak to this whole next section, okay? Because what we're going to do after he's spoken is we're going to give you some really basic tools to use to lay this out, at least for the first quarter, okay? We'll get as much done today as possible, okay? I'm willing to stay here until 5 o'clock, okay? But when you've done your first quarter, we'll take a look at where everybody's at and see where everybody's at, okay? But I'm willing to stay and continue to work with people until they've got at least the first quarter laid out, okay?
I just have a quick question. So is the
Yeah.
first quarter September to December 31st? Is that the one we're looking at?
No, we're going to plan out the main goals for the year right now, and then we're going to plan out the first quarter in detail.
Quarter being January date.
Right. Okay, but you'll have the main goals that you want to cause for each quarter already laid out because that's what we're going to go to work on next. Okay, and I'm going to call Eric up to do that because Eric is the master. And then Eric, make sure you tell them a little bit about yourself and things first. Yes, absolutely. So we're going to hand you out a document, a booklet per se, you might say. And this is our gift to you. Mostly people have to pay for this, and Eric is gifting it all to you. So you should be very, very thankful and grateful for that. I'm going to eat, Jacob, while this is going on, if you don't mind.
Well, okay. All right. So we're going to talk, and I know some of you are still getting this, I believe. We're going to talk a little bit about putting a plan of action together for your goals. It may be different than some of you've used, and I'm a real fan of working backwards. How many of you find thinking and working backwards sometimes a bit challenging? Okay. By the way, if any of you have ever gone to the airport, have you kind of figured out, well, I need to be there at 6 in the evening for my 7:30 flight, and with traffic, I need to probably leave at 4:30, and before that, I need to pack the car and kiss the family, and before that, how many of you have done that? That's called thinking backwards and planning backwards. How many of you ever had a meal for a number of people where different things had to come together at different temperatures, and you wanted it all on the table at the same time? It wasn't a 16-course meal, but rather one meal with all the things there. And you had to think, well, geez, if I'm making some kind of a sauce or gravy with some of the drippings from whatever protein I might be cooking, I had to have so many minutes, and before that. How many of you did that before? And that's called thinking backwards. So interestingly enough, thinking backwards is something we do innately in a lot of parts of our life. But when it comes to plans or projects or goals, we tend to get sort of a little shy of, well, I can't really do that. So I'm hoping to give you some insights as to how you might want to approach that, a tool that might help you with that. And if you see value in it, excellent. If you don't, well, whatever methods, to-do lists, or other things that have worked for you in the past will continue to be as valuable as they have. So first off, I want to share with you that there's the first page, if you just actually took the first page off, you have a little sort of 3-page sheet that allows you on a goal-by-goal basis to put some information there. First thing is your vision statement. What is your vision statement? And Sean talked about it earlier, so you're going to put that there, and then you're going to talk about your goal statements. What are the building blocks or aspects of your vision that you want to bring to reality through this particular goal? You could have one vision and 15 goals underneath that vision. So maybe my vision is to really take planning to a new level in the universe. Well, that's a big vision. It's not going to happen in one step. So maybe the first step is that I'm going to work with a lot of corporations to really be more efficient with planning and work on it. Maybe another goal will be I want to work in the school system with younger folks so they learn this. I think, personally, I wish I didn't do what I'm doing, although I love it passionately, because I would have loved to learn what I'm teaching when I was 15. How many of you would have loved to learn more about planning and to-do lists and time management when you were 15? Well, how come we all have to wait till we're 20 or 30 or 40 before we get that? So again, you're going to look at what this goal is all about. What is it? Why do you want it? What does not achieving it mean? What will your life look like if you don't get it? I mean, that's a flip side of why you want it. So this is, well, if I don't work on it, I'm going to have this result. What's in it for others? By the way, sometimes when we set goals, we forget that the impact for others is not always happy and positive. So if I'm working diligently on this, that means I might not have a lot of time to spend with my son or my daughter. That could be in it for them in relation to your goal. So it's really starting to identify how what I'm pursuing will affect others. And typically what we're looking for is to, if you like, deal with the contingency aspect of planning ahead of time. So if you know that's going to take time away from your family, how can you make that work for them as well as for you? Because it's great that you're pursuing this goal, but I'll bet you they're going to miss you if you're not there. So how will you build that bridge? On the next page, what are the potential challenges? What could come up before you actually even begin working on this? Now, I don't know about you, but there's all kinds of things that I don't think about and don't know about, but there are these things that I have experienced that might show up. And if I write them down and start to think about, well, if that shows up, here's what I'm going to do in that area, then I already have some kind of strategy in place to deal with the unforeseen but known events. How many of you have had things that you knew could happen when you were following whatever path you're following, but you didn't really have any sort of thought out plan, and when they happened, it was a little bit kind of difficult. So again, I'm asking you to think ahead of time. What resources are you going to need to pursue or achieve this goal? By the way, people often think resources are small in number. They think it's people, or they think it's money. Well, actually, it's that, plus it's equipment, plus it's places. How many of you have a dream of holding a course or doing something like Sean is doing here and presenting something to people? Anybody have a dream like that? Okay, just one of us, one and a half of us? Well, one of the things you're going to need is a place, and these places don't come for free. So for some of us, finding the source where we can hold those courses makes a big difference. Because if the place is $500 a pop, it'll stop some of us, right? And moving on, your support team. Who are you going to call on when things aren't going the way you thought that they might? Because we're all going to have the ups and we're all going to have the downs. So my question is, ahead of time, before I even start, who do I know is in my corner? Whether it's a coach or whether it's some friend, when you're up against the wall, who's going to continue to support you to move forward towards your vision and your goals and support you in a way that'll energize and take you there? Next page, last page. And Sean's already done a lot of this with you in various ways. But in terms of your evaluation and progress, before I even start to do any work, by the way, I don't know if you like planning or not, but I'm in love with it. Planning is something that nothing else in the universe can do for me. It allows me to see what's required before I commit. How many of you know somebody that either got married or is about to get married, and the conversation kind of goes like this: hey, honey, I love you. Me too. Let's get married. Yeah, me too. How much is mom or dad are we going to put in the wedding? Oh, I know, $30,000. When the bills come in, it's $42,000. Anyone ever hear a story like that? Now, wouldn't it be cool if the two of you sat down and built a plan of all the things we have to do and all the stuff it's going to take and all the money it's going to cost, and we could review the plan before we commit, not to each other, but commit to the plan. That's the beauty of planning. You get to put it all out and say, you know what? I can only spend time and money once. Is this where I want to spend it? The difference between $30,000 wedding and a 42 is like a wedding in a Hyundai. It's a little joke, but the point is, do you want to spend 42 on the wedding? Not a problem. You love each other, that's fine. That's your choice. But if it's an accident, that's not a good thing, right? So wouldn't it be cool to have that ability? So that's what we're doing here. Before we even commit, if you build a plan, plans don't usually get stale dated. You can put them on the shelf and say, you know what? That's a good plan. And looking at all the other things I have on my plate in terms of goals, this is not any longer the highest priority. I'll come back to it when it rises in priority. Everyone there? So what's the baseline starting point in terms of your goal? Where are you? So you have a place to measure. By the way, have you guys noticed that since we've arrived, my hair has grown? And I know it's a little joke, but here's the key. That's the issue with most of us. Slippage and not making progress is incremental. How many of you ever worked on something and, 2-3 weeks into it, you think, I don't know how it happened, but I sort of lost a few days of time here. Where'd it go? An hour here, a half hour there. So if you don't have a baseline to measure against, you never know if you're making progress. Are the wheels moving on the car? I don't feel like we're moving. No, there's ice under the wheels, but they're spinning. I want to actually make some movement. Next thing, what's your minimum or small gain as Sean speaks about? What's the minimum level of satisfaction you're willing to accept? In other words, if I get here, I can pat myself on the back and say I've been a success. And then the one that I hope we're all going for, the big game, extraordinary. What does extraordinary success look like? And that, I think, is wonderful to have already pictured and here so that we can shoot for it. And then at the end there, on that page, how do you know if you get there? A lot of us have what I would call intangible goals. They're not physical. If I say I want a computer, it's pretty easy to see I got it. Well, here it is. But if I say I want a better relationship, first of all, I don't know what better means, so I have to quantify it. But how do I measure that so that I know that when I get there, I actually have arrived, right? I want to be happier. Well, can you all smile? You got it. Is that enough happiness for you? So my question really is, before I start to move down the track of working on this goal and this plan, I want to know, what does it look like when it's there? And then I would suggest ahead of time, figure out how you're going to celebrate. How many of you in life have lots of goals, small and large, and you actually attain them, and you're too busy to stop for a moment and say, whoa, I did it. I mean, weeks ago, months ago, years ago, you didn't have it in place. Now you did. But we don't stop to celebrate or acknowledge ourselves. How many of you are like that? You just keep going. You're like the Energizer Bunny. You just keep producing. But when are you going to stop for a moment and say, whoa, look what I just did? Even if it's just a moment. And I'm going to suggest before you go off and work on this next goal, decide how you're going to celebrate. Whether it's a bubble bath with a candle, whether it's going out for dinner, whatever it is for you, write it down. It's your reward. It's like your carrot at the end of the stick. And then, in terms of reviews, what are you going to do when you're finished and you've achieved it? Looking backwards, what have you learned? How have you grown? How have you become more from this goal? But also looking forward. I don't know what your life experience is, but I'll tell you something that happens to many people. You work on something big, and it takes a lot more of you than you would normally put into your everyday world. You're working on a big dream. You're really working hard at it, and then it comes to fruition. And then it's like there's a hole in your life. It's done, it's delivered, and it's like, now what? How many of you been there? And a lot of people reach that goal. I've raised the kids. They're out of the nest. They've gone. The door is closed. And it's like, oh my God, my life is collapsing now. Because the big goal is done. I was successful. So the next question is, before you even initiate this goal, figure out what your next thing is going to be as part of that review. So before it's finished, figure out what's next. Because if you don't have a next, how many of you have gone into depression, mild or beyond, when something big has been delivered and it's like, now what? Okay. So how are we going to put a plan together? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that the working backwards really is something I appreciate and enjoy. And I have a tool that I think can make a difference for you. There's an example of it in a large laminated format there. That's really cool if you're working with a family or you're working with a couple of people or you just want to see your ideas. But we've got a smaller version for you. And if you'll pop it forward for me. So I call this the action planner. Some people didn't like that name. So another word for it is the intention activator. Whichever word you like, you can call it either. What we're going to do is we're going to look at our big goal. So as a way of using an example, I came up with the concept of I want to develop a course. So if you wouldn't mind pushing the button for me one more time. So what you're going to do is in the large bottom portion there, you're going to put your big goal. And how many of you find that sometimes when you're looking at a goal or a plan, it's overwhelming when you start to think, oh my God, there's a lot of pieces to this, and it's like, oh, I can't do it. I'm going to suggest to you that we can all think of one thing. How many of you have challenges thinking about one thing? Notice, just one of us. Okay, but here's the key. Thinking about one thing for most of us is fairly simple. So we've got developed the training program. It is our 3-month goal. So we're going to break it down into 3 pieces. So
Good,
what,
pause just for a second. So remember I said I'd like you to have 3 projects, a money generating project, a relationship generating project, and an energy generating project. So you can do one of these for each of those. You can. Or right now what you can do is you can put the area of life right there and then put the 3 projects in the next section, whatever those are, and then you can start moving them out. Do you get that? Anybody unclear about what I just said? Yeah. Okay, good. Let me just turn this around. So you put your area of life here as an example, and then this is project 1, project 2, project 3, okay? And then you write out what are the things, the 4 things that need to be done in order to have project 1 turn out? What are the things that need to be done in order to have project 2 turn out? Like so, and work your way out. So a lot of different ways to do this. We're giving you multiple things to choose from because every individual works slightly different and might have a way that works better for them, right, than another way. Those of you who are really based in structure and details like Eric is, you're going to love this. Some of you aren't going to love this because you don't want to nail down all the different actions. Well, newsflash, without action, you are not getting anywhere.
well, and there's 2 things to this. The first thing is, really, if you want to attain anything, if I ask you a question and you can answer it, you're on your way to attaining it. Here's the question. What are you doing on Tuesday in relation to that goal? If you can't answer that, then I'm going to suggest to you that you don't have actionable activities or tasks. So getting to the delivery or the result is much more difficult because it's more of a, well, I'm kind of going to work on it when I kind of can.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I'm going to suggest to you that you do want to break it out, however you do it. I'm not saying this is the only way, but this is a tool that makes it easier for people to stick it onto their calendar. What's happening on Tuesday? So what we're going to do, we're talking about developing a training program. I'm going to ask you to think about just that one thing. What are 3 things we're able to do around that, one at a time, if you don't mind? So we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an outline. What's the course going to look like? What am I going to talk about for 8 hours? And we're also going to develop some exercises and case studies, and then we're going to develop what I call a learning guide, you know, the little workbook or the material. And I'm also going to think about what other materials I need. And then I'm going to do a pilot, which in my world is I'm going to run it once to make sure that people actually get some value out of it. And I'm going to get some feedback as to how to make it better. So you might say,
Does this make sense to everybody?
And you might say, well, I wouldn't do it. That's okay.
Oh, wait, these guys aren't.
Rules.
Okay, keep going.
And what we're going to do now is I don't want to think about all that at once. That's too much. It's going to hurt my head. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the first one, creating the outline, and we're going to look at it. It's a 1-month goal now out of the 3 months. I'm going to break it down on a week-by-week basis. What do I need to do in order? By the way, the other thing that's cool about this kind of a tool is you can share it with friends or associates. So how many of you would like to develop a course but don't have training in curriculum design, you know, scope and sequence and all that fun stuff, key learning indicators and all the good stuff? How many of you would like to develop a course? Hands up if you want to develop a course one day. How many of you don't have training in curriculum design? So you can reach out to other people and they can help you figure out what these are. Because you're not asking, how do I do it all? You're simply saying, look, if I want to create an outline and develop some exercises or case studies, what do I need to think about? So let's take a look at it. Here comes the first one. Well, I have to determine what are the learning goals. What do I want people to leave with at the end of the session? Whatever it is. Next one. So second week, I'm going to look at an outline with some timings. How long am I going to spend on this? How long am I going to spend on that? And also, I want to list. I'm not going to create, but I'm going to list the kind of exercises and case studies I want to create. Next one we're going to do, I'm going to detail the exercise and the case studies. In other words, now I'm actually making them. Now I know what I'm going to make. I'm going to have an exercise where people are going to write down the big game, the small game. We're going to do it for the 4 life areas. And Sean figured out that's going to take 42 minutes. So that's what she's going to do. Now she's going to say, well, how do I do that? What are the sheets? What are the exercises? What am I going to get people to do? We're going to develop that. Next one, we're going to look at what we can do in relation to have people actually look at those exercises or case studies without the whole course being in place. So if I talk to a friend and say, hey, would this sheet actually make sense to you? And I'm going to kind of get some feedback. Am I like providing information that's useful, or is it something that people can't understand? And then the last one, I'm going to create the learning guide outline and determine what handouts I'm going to need for the course. So I've been able to take a very large for some people, complicated piece of work, creating a training program. I've broken it into 3 things that I feel I can achieve and make sense from a building block perspective, working backwards from the core goal, the deliverable out. I'm now looking at the first one, and I've broken it into my 4.5 weeks or whatever you want to look at. Now I'm going to look at just the first one. What do I need to do to come up with my learning goals for this course? What can I do on Monday? Well, I decided on Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to do some research of similar courses. It's probably likely that some other human being on the planet has delivered a course on a similar topic somewhere, sometime. And today it's wonderful. You Google anything and you get their PowerPoint presentation.
Pause just for a minute. What do we call that? Research, but it's not doing what? Not reinventing the wheel. You guys spend so much time trying to come up with a new way to do something when there are, like, the 80-20 rule. 20% of the world already knows how to do it. Just go and find them. Steal, steal, steal. Acknowledge, acknowledge, acknowledge. As long as you acknowledge it, you can steal it. You just have to acknowledge where it came from.
That's not ethical.
As long as they know it is,
Unless you talk to the person.
that's what I said. Acknowledge who developed the program.
Talk to them first.
Yes,
Acknowledge.
that's what I said, though. As long as you are in communication. There is no need to keep remaking what we already do when there are tons of people out there who are already doing it very successfully. Okay? Yeah, you need to be in communication with them. I love your program. I want to do something similar. Okay? The only time it's a problem is if it's an online program and this person has an online program and blah, 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 right? But in most cases, location, as long as you're not in direct, competition with them, people will say, absolutely. It's the highest form of compliment and flattery that you can get is if somebody uses your stuff. Just acknowledge it.
And not only that, for many of us, when we're working on something that's new to us, one, we're not sure of all the variables and all the things that are out there, but sometimes we face, in business at least for many of us, we face the question of, well, how do I price this? How many of you ever had that question? How do I price this?
How do I know how much to charge, right?
Product. So you go out to the world, you find out what other people are selling it for, and then you decide where you want to fall in that spectrum. At the high end, at the low end, be the leader in terms of price at the high end or low end. So we've gone ahead, we've done some research for a couple of days. Now I'm going to look at the primary course goals that I have for my course. I've looked at what other people are doing. And I don't want to repeat what they're doing because you know what, I could just talk to them and say, hey, could you mentor me in your course and I'll just deliver that. Or if I want to create something that I think, hey, I have an edge here, I have some different insights I want to create. Now I'm looking at what's out there in the world, I'm creating my primary goal. So by Wednesday, I've got some good solid footing to where I'm heading with this. And on Thursday, I'm going to work out my learning objectives. Remember, that's all about determining the learning goal. So I'm on track with that 1 week goal. And on Friday, just before the weekend, I'm going to look at what skills I want people to develop. And I'm also going to look at, small space, I'm going to look at what exercise and case studies I'm thinking of as being useful. I'm not developing them, I'm just listing them. I'll have them work out their small games and their big games. Okay, what else? Well, I'll have them do this. Everyone there? So if you're saying, well, I kind of get it, here's an example. It's for some of you outside of what your interests may be. For some of you, it may be valuable. This is if you were going to write a business plan and a value statement for a new business, and Sean just talked about, hey, if you don't have a business, starting one might not be a bad thing. So if you're interested, I've shown you how to break it down from the big goal to the small daily or weekly activities. And on the next side of that same sheet, I've given you the whole thing broken out. And you might say, well, I would never do that. Absolutely. Isn't it great? You don't have to do it. You just have to have something to use as an example and decide, of those things, what would I do? And today in the world of Google, there are so many people out there with so much information. You should be able to put a clear plan together so that you can attain your goal. But again, for me, the beautiful thing about the plan is I can look at it and decide if I want to commit to it. Commit the time, commit the resources, money, etc. And if I don't, I can either modify it. On that thing, it's whiteboard. Hopefully in here it'll be pencil. So you all have an eraser or a cloth, and you can change it 100 times. But the more important thing for me, on the outer edge of this tool, it's very small, but you can mark your progress with a highlighter, with a check mark, a little dot, whatever you want. The tiny, tiny outer ring, you can say, did it, because you didn't notice my hair group. And that's exactly what stops us in the world. Because if I get behind by 2 or 3 days, how many of you, when you had a plan or you had a goal and you're working away on it, and then other things intervened or life happened and you got behind, that was enough of a challenge that you felt the sort of
Slow down of momentum.
Yeah, the slow down of momentum, the inertia crept in, and that you just didn't get back on the horse and got going. Okay, so this is a way to see if we're, and I love things like that, because with a whiteboard, I can just say, I didn't get those things done, but I'm not going to beat myself up for the next 3 or 6 months. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to erase it on the dates it was, and I'm going to move it forward so it's ahead of me, not behind me. So am I on track? You bet. And so it's not a tool about beating ourselves up with, but rather a tool to see where we are and continue to know where we have to go yet. Comments, questions? Go ahead.
So what happens if at the end of that you find out that there's no market? Nobody's really interested in that question.
Well, again, I didn't sit down and look at it from a business perspective. I looked at it developing a course. I would suggest prior to doing all this work that there should be a bit of research around interest and around how many people are taking courses like that.
What do we call that, by the way, that kind of research, Due diligence, market research, right?
Right.
Does the market need this, want this, will pay for this, right?
And in the world that I work in, we would call it a business case, because somebody has to go and present it, if you're a sole proprietor, to yourself, but usually you have to present it to your manager or to some shareholders and say, hey, we want to spend some money to do this. What do you think? And I've shown you here empirically that it actually has some value. Other questions? Okay.
How do you you just said you can like erase things and move things forward, but if you've got this whole thing filled out in such detail, you don't have any space to move anything forward. So how do you handle those situations?
Well, I mean, again, one of the ways that I would deal with it, I would just change the dates. If you look at this, you look at that one, same thing, when you're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 13, that's 13 weeks. So cross out week 2 and make it week 1, or cross out week 3 and make it week 2, and just shift it. Like you don't have to move everything. All that shifted was time has passed and you didn't get the goal. So just shift the calendar ahead and say, okay, instead of doing that on the second week of January, I'm going to do that the third week of January. Everything 1 week past that. Does that make it easier?
Now remember, right, your plan has to be as organic as you are. Okay, human beings are organic creatures, right? So your plan must also be organic. Nothing is written in stone. Okay, what's going to ensure that you do this isn't having a great plan. Does anybody know what's actually going to ensure that you do what you said you would do? What's the number one factor?
Motivation.
You could be really motivated and still not take action, although that's a factor for sure. Okay, Andrew? Doing it? Okay, good. You know what? If you were already reliable for doing it, none of you would be here. Jacob? Accountability, exactly. Someone to hold you to account for doing what you said you would do by when you said you would do it.
And by the way, the beauty, remember, only 20% of people wrote their goals down or had them. Sorry, 4% wrote them down, 1% reviewed them. The cool thing with a tool like this, or a tool like this, if you want to use it, if you write it all out, there's a lot of opportunities by a scanner for small ones, but those big ones, one picture, send it to your coach, send it to your support team and say, look, here's what I'm working on. Can you call me once a week or whatever and say, how we doing? And I promise, cross my heart or whatever you want to do, I promise to tell you the truth. Because one of the weird things about people and plans is that often when they're not watching it happen, the people that are being asked, how's it going, will always say, well, everything's going well, because they will tell you what you hope to hear versus what's real. So you still have to be accountable, whoever said that, and that is part of having other people support you. So if you have your support team, have a photo of it, and they can see where you're supposed to be, and they ask you, how's it going, you can send another photo in an hour with the date shifted and say, here's what I'm now accountable for. Agree with me? Any other questions? Was it worthwhile? How many think you could use a tool like this and there'd be some value for you? Just one of us? Okay. 2 of us? Okay.
They're just lazy. Remember I said human beings are lazy? Even raising their hand is too much effort.
I think it's awesome. And I like that it's in a one page. I think having it in a one page is really valuable because for me, one of the things that I struggle with is keeping it in existence for myself. So having it in one page where I can see all of it,
Mhm.
it's very easy to see and it's very shareable. And
Yeah,
it's
very good.
good.
The more you share it, the better. It's great, Alicia.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, do you think you could edit it?
Yes,
Yeah, I know.
he just did.
Right? Here's how you do it. If you want to introduce your team to this, it's really simple. Go over there and write your goal in. Say, guys, we're working on this thing for the next 3 months, 6 months. That's a 6-month planner. You know, we can have them sliced and diced however you want. So 6 months. Write your goal up there before they show up. Say, guys, I'm wanting to talk to you about this goal we're working on. Can we break that down so I can kind of get my head around it? Well, what do you think we could do if we were going to do something the first month? And they say, blah, blah. You write it down. What do you think we should do next? Blah, blah. Before you know it, they got the first 6 pieces done. And then say, okay, let's look at that one. Well, what should we do in the first week? I mean, it really is, I like the word organic. To me, this is not hard thinking. It's more about leading people through it by doing versus talking about how to do it. Just do it. And it's not a Nike commercial. Little joke.
Other questions, comments, yeah, buts?
I think it's great.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so let's get started with the main biggest goals, okay? So what are the big, give me some examples of what do you want to cause by, it's December 31st, 2017. What have you caused in the area of business and career? Let's hear from a few people. We're all standing in. It's December 31st, 2017. What's been caused? Jacob.
Offices on 3 continents.
Okay, in his businesses, offices on 3 continents by 2017, December 31st. Someone else in the area of business. What is been caused by December 31st, 2017? Yep.
Extra money for travel,
Great. How much?
$1,000.
An extra $1,000 a month is coming in for travel?
Within 5 months.
Okay, so by December 31st, how much extra money have you put aside for travel?
7.
Sorry?
7.
7,000. So by the December 31st, 2017, you've saved up $7,000 for travel. Brilliant. Good. Someone else. What's a result that you've caused by December 31st, 2017? Yes, Charlotte. Great. So the first draft is done. Very good. Great. Okay. In the area of relationships, what's something that you've caused in the area of relationships by 2017, December 31st?
I have 4 more intimate, supportive, like-hearted, minded friends.
Brilliant. Great outcome. You guys get that? What else in the area of relationships? Yeah.
Have an active business network.
Great. An active business network, which would be how many people by December 31st?
Not that far.
Okay. Remember, specific and measurable, right? We won't know if we've reached it if we just say active. That's how Laura was like 4 intimate, connected friends, right? Measurable. You'll know you've reached it, right? One of mine is to plan by the end of 3rd quarter, okay, that we've actually planned and held some sort of family reunion, right? Given my dad almost died a couple of weeks ago, right? So it's one of those things that now we're all thinking about, right? And caring about, right? Okay, what about in the area of health and well-being? What's a goal in the area of health and well-being? Yeah, Andrew?
I'll be 90 pounds lighter.
Okay, so you've released 90 pounds, measurable, right?
I able to get the exercises my exercise coach has.
Great, your exercise coach is giving you an A+ on doing the exercises he's laid out. Brilliant. 2 actual measurements, right, that you can get. Now, mind you, you also have to get from him where he would rate you now so that you know when you got there.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, you need a baseline to go from. Very good. What about the area of home and physical environments? What's a project or a goal inside of home and physical environments? Yeah.
To have the spare bedroom completely cleaned out of all the crap that's in there and have it set up as a working, comfortable office.
Which you can, that's measurable, right? By December 31st, she's going to know if she has a working office versus a spare bedroom. You get that?
Yeah.
Completely measurable. Okay, so everybody get this? So you now want to lay out for yourself, what are the main goals you're going to have in each category area? And in your focus category area, I'd like you to have at least 3. Okay. So if your focus category area is health and well-being, you want at least 3 goals in that area for the whole year. Okay. So, and then you can come up with your projects inside of those goals. So what would be a project that you would take on that would help you reach that goal? So for example, if Andrew's goal is to release 90 pounds, right? Then there's going to be a couple of projects inside of that goal. Well, what could a project inside of that goal look like? Yeah, it could be like if you could have a project in the world of exercise, a project in the world of eating, a project in the world of water, or what Jacob calls the 100-year plan, which covers all of those: air, water, food, and shelter, right? So he could come up with that for each one, right? But yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so what will be the actual projects? Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to come up with the goals for the year, okay? You can write, if anybody needs more paper, just let me know because we have some. Please make sure that your goals are SMART. Mary, can you go to the SMART one, which is like, I think 2 down? There you go. So make sure that they're SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, reasonable, and timely. Okay? In other words, that they fulfill on that, right? Well, reasonable means, reasonable is if everything is in place that you say will be in place, that it's reasonable to assume that you could achieve that. So let me give you an example, okay? So one of my goals is to release another, so much weight in the year 2017, okay? Not reasonable would be, I'm going to climb Mount Fuji in 2017. That wouldn't be reasonable for someone of my size and my current health. You get that? It'd be completely unrealistic, right? Jacob would go, yeah, sweet deal. Okay, good. let's create something reasonable now, because that's clearly not reasonable. Okay. Now, if I had climbed Mount Fuji and then gained weight in a year and I wanted to go climb Mount Fuji again, that might be more reasonable. You get that? Okay. So reasonable just means do you have what it takes? Is it laid out? Does it make sense? Is it not a pie in the sky fantasy world that you're living in? Okay. That's what reasonable means. Okay, so we want to come up with at least 1 goal for each category area. Okay, and for your focus category area, at least 3 goals for this year. What do you want it to look like December 31st, 2017? By the way, my recommendation: play big. Play big. Create a big honking game you couldn't possibly know how to win. My job is to make sure that you got a bunch of actions in place that will cause it. Your job is to make sure the inner voice doesn't have you play small right now. Okay? Because it will try.
How do we balance that with being realistic?
You bounce it off other people. Listen, you internally aren't going to know what's reasonable. Okay? And when you bounce it off other people, Laura, you want to bounce it off people who are actually full of possibility. Not your Debbie Downers to begin with, right? Avoid Debbie Downers during this part of the conversation. Okay? They are always going to tell you can't do it. Right? Come to somebody like me or Jacob or Andrew, or Ron or Eric, but for what's possible, right? We'll tell you if we think it's reasonable or not. Dick Downers, that's right. Debbie or Dick Downers, exactly. All right, does anybody online have any questions about that?
No, that's clear.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's do that work, please. Go to work.